I'm very happy to be with each of you here today, especially for a baptism. Baptisms always bring wonderful memories. Um, we're happy to have some people even come here who haven't been here in a long time. Cynthia and Mo, nice to have you all here. Of course, Cynthia, she was baptized here in this church when she was 14. So very happy to have you here. Traveling, do you like to travel? I love traveling. When I was a kid, I used to think about traveling. And of course, my first travel, I don't remember very much. I was only 2 years old when we traveled from Europe by boat all the way to New York Harbor and entered into New York and took a bus all the way to Sacramento, California. And then when I was a kid, I always wanted to travel, but we couldn't do much traveling because we had to work like slaves on the farm, So when it was vacation time, all the kids in school were talking about wonderful, they're going to go on vacation. And I'm like, oh, I got to work on the farm that week. Okay. So anyway, so as soon as I turned 18 years old, the first thing we did is we left California and we traveled through Nevada and Colorado and some of those states around in that area. But the last couple of years, a lot of things have changed, especially when we're talking about travel. During the time of this is not working very well here. During the time of what we have known as COVID, we have become accustomed to some restrictions. We've had stay-at-home orders. Got to stay home. You can't go anywhere. We had things like mask mandates. You heard about those before, So, I had my favorite mask for a while until I got my other ones, So, I had to travel around like that, So that was nice. We had quarantines. You had to quarantine yourself. One time I had an urgent meeting to go to in New York, and the problem was that once you enter New York from Virginia, you have to spend 2 weeks in quarantine, but our meeting was in a couple days, so couldn't go. Some places, like in Australia, you had to quarantine when you enter for 2 weeks, and you got to pay $200 a day too for quarantine. Okay, so you enter Australia, that's $2,800 for quarantine. We've had, of course, social distancing. I'm going to have to change something here real quick. Just 1 second here so we can make this a little bit easier. Another connection will work a little bit better, so we can work with this. All right. So, we had social distancing. In some of the churches, they had to, like in Roanoke, we had to divide our church into two. So we had upstairs and downstairs in order to have social distancing. And then we had other various travel mandates. But travel mandates is not something new. This is not just during COVID. When you traveled before, you had to have something called a passport. That was actually a mandate. You couldn't go without a passport. And then, you went to different countries and you had different visa requirements. In this case here, that was a little challenge. That was for the Democratic Republic of Congo when I went there. I traveled from Roanoke by train to Washington, D.C. to save myself all the hassle. And I finally arrived at the Congolese embassy, and I was quite happy. I had the form filled out and everything else for a visa, and it was the wrong Congo. There's 2 Congos, okay? And the other Congo was on the other side of town. And I got there just a few minutes before closing, and they were quite nice to me to allow me to go ahead and fill it out and get ready to go to Congo. And then they take up an entire page of my passport to put in their visa. Okay, and then you had something called a yellow card. If you don't have the vaccination card, you cannot enter countries. especially Africa and Central and South America and some of those countries. I still enter those countries without one of these, just a little bit more time consuming. I have to explain to them why and why not and everything else, And finally, one day I was going to Angola, and there, where we were going was right in the middle of a yellow fever epidemic. And so eventually I finally decided to take the vaccine. And of course, it was sad because for 2 years I suffered. It took me about 2 years of cleansings and everything else to get over that one, because that was really tough. I mean, the first thing, I used to travel everywhere, never got sick, okay? Never had problems there, and right after the vaccination, the first thing I did was get sick. Okay, and it was really, really bad. When I was in Malawi, I barely survived that one. And then you think you got everything ready. Now you're ready to enter the country, and now you got to fill out a form. Okay, so you have an entry card to go and fill out to go in there. And when you think you finally got it all figured out, then you got to deal with border control. And sometimes border control will turn you right around. Okay, they don't like the way you look. They don't like something or another, different things, and they will turn you around. And so there are a lot of mandates when you travel. And this was even before COVID, and now, of course, there are even more. Now, if you plan on immigration, that's another story. If you want to immigrate to a country, then you have medical evaluations. Yeah, you got to go through, when I was moving to Australia, I had to go through medical evaluation, but one that they approve. It's not just any medical evaluation. You got to go to an approved medical evaluation. And then not only that, you got to have a police clearance. So I applied for a police clearance. In the case of the United States, it had to be an FBI clearance. And you apply for that thing, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting. What's taking them so long? Well, they want more money, is usually what it is. They say the normal process takes so long, but you can get it expedited if you pay extra. And I thought I got a bit of time. But, after 3-4 months waiting, I said, all right, I want to pay this. And I got it the next week, okay? So that's how it goes. So you have police clearances. You have to have a clear criminal clearance. And then they have to have questions of how you're going to sustain yourself. So in my case, going to Australia, I didn't have to worry so much about this because my wife was born in Australia. She was an Australian citizen. So I applied not for actually I did. My first one, I did apply for a worker's visa because that was quicker than going through her. But once I got there to get my permanent residency, it was through her. Then they also do a mental evaluation. Are you mentally capable of coming here? And sometimes there's even a language tests. What kind of language are you able to speak the language of the country to some aspect? Now, there's a chapter in the Bible that we refer to as the chapter of faith. And we know the verse there, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. And then after it tells you about faith, what faith is, then it goes through a list. And if you go in Hebrews chapter 11, you're going to have a list of individuals who had experienced something called faith. And there is a common thread. When you look at Hebrews chapter 11, there is something common in that list. And that list, the commonality in that list is that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Okay, so they lived. Okay, so Isaac was born in Palestine, but that wasn't his home. Did you know that? Did you know that was not his home? Where's your home? Where's your home? Where do you live? Or are you a pilgrim and a stranger? Now, that's the question that we got to analyze here. And Selena's going to publicly testify today that this is not her home. You don't live here, just passing through. You see, you're a stranger and a pilgrim. Now, what does it mean that you are a pilgrim? What does pilgrim mean? Pilgrim means, in Hebrews 11, verse 14, for they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. They're not satisfied with the country where they live. Are you satisfied with the country where you live? No, it's true. United States is a really good place to live. I mean, United States, Australia, well, Australia until recently anyway. A lot of these countries, these are wonderful places to live. I've been to different countries and, people talk about illegal aliens coming in this country and everything else, and, you haven't been everywhere. When I've been to some of those places, I mean, as far as the environment is concerned, who wants to stay there? Okay, who wants to stay in some of these places? Some of these places were really well. I mean, I've been to like Angola. Angola is a beautiful country. It has a lot of wonderful things. It's one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but the government steals everything, doesn't even give you a decent road, okay? So the problem is, so you're dissatisfied there. But are you satisfied here? Are you satisfied here? You see, or are you seeking a country? Are you still passing through? Are you seeking a country? And in verses 15 and 16, it says, and truly, if they had been mindful of that country for whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to return. You can go back anytime. You see, Selena, you have a chance. Today, you're going to publicly declare you're seeking a better country. But you see, you can always go back. You can always go back. But do you want to go back? You see, it says here, but now they desire what? They desire a better country. And what kind of a better country? That is an heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he had prepared for them a city. God had prepared for you something better. But the question is, are you going there or are you here? Are you happy here? Is this where you want to live? Is this where you want to be comfortable and spend the rest of eternity here? You can spend the rest of eternity here. I mean, it's going to be underground a little bit, but We're all going to be in the new earth. You can be in the new earth planting vineyards, or you can be the fertilizer for those vineyards because there's a fire, then, you get burned up and everything else. Choice that you have. You see, before the crucifixion, now, this is John chapter 14. In John chapter 13 was the Last Supper. So this is right at the very end. And Jesus says what? In my Father's house are what? Are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. Did you know God has prepared a place for you? There's a place there with your name on it. Are you going to claim that? Is that what you're claiming? Oh, that's the name, that's what I'm claiming? Or are you getting sidetracked by the things that are around you? You see, when we think about the place we're going, when you're thinking about travel mandates, when you're thinking about a pandemic, this is nothing yet, by the way. If you look at Bible prophecy, this pandemic was nothing, actually. Very few people died in comparison to how many people there are. There's going to be bigger pandemics that are going to be coming according to Bible prophecy. It's going to be destroying a lot more people in the world. There's going to be a lot of other things. But in the midst of all of this, as you're thinking about all of this, and some people say, oh, we want to study prophecy. Why? Because scare us to do the right thing. Well, if it's scaring you to do the right thing, you're missing the point of prophecy. And you just missed it. Why? Because Jesus says what? Let not your heart be troubled. In the midst of all of it, let not your heart be troubled. Why? Our next General Conference session is going to be over down in Colombia. And, somebody called me up and he says, Brother Peter, I know, Colombia. He says, is it safe? Is it safe over there? I said, I'm the wrong person to ask because I felt safe everywhere I went. I showed you the visa there for Congo. I was there in Congo. We were about an hour away from Kinshasa, and for the first bit, I said, look, I want to stay here at the school. I don't want to be traveling every day. They said, but it's not ready for you. I said, but I want to stay here. I said, look, give us another day. We got to put a few more bars up there and everything else. I said, oh, whatever. I'm quite comfortable here. Anyway, so for those few days, we had to, after the day's work, we had to travel back there, and the travel back there means you have to go for a distance until the main road. Okay, and it's dark time, and I'm going for a walk. They say, you can't go for a walk here. I said, why not? It's a nice country air. I'm going for a walk. So, like I said, don't be basing your, whether it's safe or not on me, because I felt safe right over there. I felt a little bit too safe there. That's how they stole my phone, okay? So I had to learn a little bit more. I got to be a little bit more cautious, than this, because, So, but Jesus says, let not your heart be troubled. And when you're looking at prophecies and looking at the final event, is your heart troubled? But it's not troubled when you know you don't belong here. When I'm in one of those countries and there's chaos going on and all this type of stuff, I was thinking, well, 2 weeks, my flight is out of here. I'm God. Okay. Even there when I was in Malawi, it was a bad case of dysentery. That was after that vaccine thing. And I'm there in Malawi, and it's like, boy, I still have to hold meetings. I mean, right in the middle of all of that stuff, it was really tough, okay? So I'm there holding meetings, and at one stage I had to sit down, and they're reading everything, okay? And I had to sit, I just couldn't stand up anymore. But I had to finish that thing. But to me, it's like, I just 3 more days, and I'm out of here. I can go home, and I can start taking care of myself, you see. But what happens if you've got to stay there the rest of your life, rest of eternity? You see, when we know we don't belong in this world, then our heart is not troubled. It's not troubled. Okay, and so if I die, it's no big deal, okay? If I die, I mean, come on, it's people terrified, oh, what happens if you die? Well, so what? If we are not fearful of dying, then our heart is not troubled. And actually when I left Kinshasa, I was flying to South Africa, and I was on the way to Nairobi, and the plane there actually dropped, I think, about 1 kilometer or something, right out of the sky, and everyone's screaming and everything, and the plane is going straight down in that storm. And as I'm listening to everyone screaming, I just bowed my head and says, Lord, if this is it, make sure I'm ready. I said, Lord, I do want to live a little bit longer. I do have other things I want to finish. But if this is it, this is it. So what? Let not your heart be troubled. We shouldn't be afraid of all these things. So, you see, why not? Because the place that God has prepared for us is a place, it says in Revelation 21, verse 4, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. And there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Can you imagine a place there's no more death, no more sorrow, no more crying? And sometimes we get confused with the things of this world. Why? Because the world is offering us things. Here, you can have this, you can have that. And we look at that thing and say, well, that looks good. But you see, when you look at something better, when you find something of better quality, and somebody offers you the same thing at a higher price, but cheaper value, okay? So you look at this thing, this is cheaper. I remember, cameras, one brother, he bought a camera here in America. It was $240. And he went to Uruguay, and the same camera was there for $240. He thought, wow, this is amazing. And then he picked up the camera, and it was light. Okay, the one here in America is made with solid materials. Same country, by the way. They make it for different countries. Okay, they make one thing for America, and they make the same thing for another country with the same price but cheaper material. So what is that? That's not value. Okay, that you're being shortchanged. And the world is offering us a short change. And we're looking at it thinking this is a wonderful thing. It's going to last only 2 weeks, but nonetheless, okay. But you see, God has something better for you. God has said, and that's why when there's no more tears, no more suffering, no more dying. Why? Because it says there in verse 21, verse 5, I make all things new. Everything's going to be brand new. So how is it possible that God is able to remove dying? How is that possible? In Romans 6, verse 9, knowing that Christ, being raised from the dead, dieth no more, death hath no more dominion over him. Because of Jesus Christ, not because of his death, but because he died and rose again. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the guarantee that death is not going to reign over us. And so you had people like Jacob, when he goes there to Pharaoh and he speaks to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asks him, "How old are you?" And it's interesting, the answer, he doesn't just say, "I'm 130 years old." He says, "The days of what? Of my pilgrimage." Why pilgrimage? I don't belong here. This is not my place. The days of my pilgrimage have been 130 years, and he says they've been short, evil, and few. Yeah, they've been few days. 130 years old, and he thinks that they are few days. You see, after that time, we wish we'd have 130. I was reading somewhere that who was it? Some World War II guy just died. He was 101. 101. Okay, we think that's a good day, but Jacob, 130, and he says that's few days. And today the Bible says what? David says, if you're living 70 years, which is 70 years, that's a good length of time. I know Brother Bowers doesn't think about that way, but nonetheless, 70, and if you end up with 80, that's something really good. I know when I was a kid, of course, I thought 40 was old, all right? Now, 80, and, 80 is not that old either anymore, and so you're looking at, so we're living actually on borrowed time. We just had a funeral of one brother, just turned 70. Had a funeral the week later of another brother, he was 76. A couple of months back, a friend of mine died in California, he was 65. That's getting a little bit too close for comfort. In Roanoke, we had somebody that died, he was 46. I know you guys had here somebody that died, what, he was 18 or something? That's tragic. 16, wow, that's really, we're living on borrowed time, brethren. All of you, you're living on borrowed time. You may think all these plans and all these things that you want to do in this world, but you're on borrowed time. You see, why? Because we are simply on a journey. You're on a journey. Why? For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Are you looking for that city? Or are you satisfied here? I'm sorry, this world doesn't, I've traveled all different parts of the world, quite a few countries everywhere. You go every place and people ask me, which country do you like the best? Every country has something nice in there, but every country has something you don't like either, America has things you don't like, okay? I mean, it's better than some of the other places I've been to, but nonetheless, this is not where I want to spend the rest of eternity. There's a better place. So let's talk a little bit about travel mandates. Let's talk a little bit about travel mandates. You see, the problem with us is we are not just going for a visit. So when you're going to visit a country, there may be requirements, like some requirements are, quite simple. I remember when I went back in 1995, I went to the Romanian embassy in Washington, D.C. to get a visa for Romania. They told me you don't need a visa as an American citizen. As of May of this year, American citizen can go there for 30 days. So my wife, I had to get a visa for her and whatnot, but for my son and I, we were fine. So I get over there to the border, and we're traveling in a whole busload of people from Belgrade. We get to the border there of Romania, and they're walking around. I've never had that experience where they're walking around with machine guns with their finger on the trigger, walking around the bus, looking at you. And they're telling you, you need a visa, and it costs $40. And I'm not paying $80 for me and my son. I'm sorry. I said, I don't need a visa. They said, yes, you have a visa. You're going to another country. You must have a visa. I said, you better check your own laws. Machine gun or not, I'm not giving you $80, okay? So he kept walking around the bus there for, about an hour. Everybody on the bus is getting upset with me because just pay the thing. I'm not paying the thing, okay? I've been to their embassy. I'm not paying the thing, okay? But I was going there. Eventually, they have to let me go through because that's what their law says anyway. So they're going to get about $800 off us from everybody on the bus, and I'm only going to give them my share. So anyway, but that's just visiting. When you become, here it says we are not what? There we are no more strangers and foreigners, but what? We are fellow citizens with the saints. Okay, so fellow citizens, that means we are immigrating. This is an immigration thing. This is not a visitor visa. So yes, I understand that we have this thing about passports. So, you still have to have a passport when you're applying for citizenship, but it has many more other things. Before you become a citizen, you actually have to be a resident of a country for a certain period of time. So are you a resident of heaven? No, that's a question. We'll get to that in a minute. Are you a resident of heaven or not? So if you're planning on immigrating, if you're planning on becoming a citizen of a country, what do you have to do before you go to that country? What do you have to do? The question is, in Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 18 says, the path of the just is as a shining light which shineth more and more unto the perfect day. What does that mean? That means what? What do we have to be experiencing in order to have that? It says it is an exalted privilege to be connected with Jesus. In every condition of trial, we may have the consolation of his presence. And now notice this, we may live in the very atmosphere of heaven. Before my parents, I was 2 years old when we came to this country. My parents, my father, when he was in prison for the faith, he applied for a green card lottery. Okay, and it took a while, and finally he got it. And that's how we came here. But now that we got this thing, they have to learn the language. So my mom, before getting here, she learned 800 words of English. Yeah, she was starting to get ready for that, And of course, it was British English. So, you come to New York, my dad sends her out to go buy something, and she has no idea what they're saying. Okay. All right. And so my dad goes out there, doesn't know any English. He goes there with his sign language and comes over with all this food, So, but nonetheless, you had an atmosphere of heaven. Our enemies will thrust us into prisons, but prison's walls cannot cut off the communication between Christ and our soul. One who sees our every weakness, who is acquainted with every trial, is above all earthly powers, and angels can come to us in lonely cells, bringing light and peace from heaven. The question is, are you living in the atmosphere of heaven? John Bunyan was confined there in Bedford jail, and from there, what happened? Issued the light that has illuminated the pathway to the celestial city. Are you looking to the celestial city? Or are you stuck in this dark world, looking at everything around you, bemoaning everything? In other words, we don't belong to ourselves. You see, when you live for something else, if you're a citizen of a country and you're in another country, people are looking at you, and everything you do, they blame on your country. Yeah, I've been to different countries, everything is like, oh, you're an American. Okay, this is what America's like, okay? You do something wrong, they're after you. For none of us liveth to ourselves, and no man dieth to himself. For whether we live unto the Lord, and whether we die unto the Lord. Whether we live, therefore, or die, we are the Lord's. In other words, it doesn't matter to me whether I'm living or dying. Really doesn't matter. None of that matters. So, if we are to live in the atmosphere of heaven, whose laws are we under? And when I moved to Australia, I was under both laws, actually, both American and Australian laws. You're there under their laws and their jurisdiction as well, but you're also under the law of the United States. And that's why it says, thy statutes have been my songs in the house of my pilgrimage. So this is the house of what? My pilgrimage. And yet thy statutes have been my songs. I have remembered thy name, O Lord, in the night, and I have kept thy law. This I had because I kept thy precepts. So now, that means that there's a difference between those who are living here and those who are going to another country. And Apostle Peter says, dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims to abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. There are things that are affecting our flesh here, and yet we abstain from fleshly lust. Why? Because we are what? We are strangers and we're pilgrims. We have a different destination. Having your conversation honest among the Gentiles, that whereas they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, which they shall behold, glorify God in the day of visitation. That means in the day of visitation, there's going to be many people that are actually going to be saved. Why? Not because of what we said, not because of what we dressed like, but what we acted like. Your conversations, what we are, how we show that we are. I mean, it affects the way we eat, the way we dress, the way we talk. It affects all of that. But what type of people are we? It's interesting in Matthew chapter 18 and verse 13, it says there that we are to become as what? We are to become as little children, but are we to be childish? No, there's a difference, isn't there? In 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 11 there, it says there, when I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. And I thought as a child. But what? When I became a man, what did I do? I put away childish things. So it means that we are not to be acting like little children. And in Selected Messages, Book 1, it gives a little description there. You may be tall and well proportioned in self, but you cannot enter here. You have a lots of self there. You may be even well proportioned as a self individual, but you can't enter there. None can enter who are grown-up children, carrying with them the dispositions, the habits, and the characteristics which pertain to children. So what are the characteristics of little children? Notice this. If you have nurtured suspicions, are you suspicious of people? What about criticism? Have you been developing criticisms? Well, that's childish. What about temper? You get affected easily with your temper. Some people tell me, well, that's just me. That's my temper. That's your problem. Okay, that is just you. Need conversion. Okay? Self-dignity. You cannot be admitted, for you would spoil the feast. All who go in through the door have on the wedding garment woven in the loom of heaven. Those who educate themselves to pick flaws in the character of others reveal a deformity that makes families unhappy, that turns souls from the truth to choose fables. As a church, we're supposed to be what? A family. Are there some things that make us unhappy as a family? Why? Childish. Your leaven of distrust, your want or lack of confidence, your power of accusing closes against you the door of admittance. Within this door, nothing can enter that could possibly mar the happiness of the dwellers by marring their perfect trust in one another. That's heaven. There is a travel mandate. It's not unreasonable mandate, okay? Some mandates have been very unreasonable, but the heavenly, there is no unreasonable mandate. You cannot join the happy family in the heavenly courts, for why? I have wiped all tears from their eyes. You can never see the King in his beauty if you are not yourself a representative of his character. What kind of character do you have? Do you have a character that is preparing for the kingdom of heaven? And what else? You know, in Luke chapter 20, there is a parable there. A certain man, he planted a vineyard and led it forth the husbandman and went into a far country for a long time. And at the season, he sent servants to the husbandman that he should give him of the fruit of the vineyard. But the husband beat him and sent him away empty. So here is a parable about a certain man. What does he do? He plants a vineyard. What does he expect from that vineyard? Is it just that he expects fruits? Is it just that he expects fruits? I mean, just understand something. He planted it. He put it in there. You know, he put this stuff there. He expects something in return. That is a normal expectation. And those who are left to care for the vineyard, it's not their vineyard. They didn't plant it. They took care of it. And then when he sends there and says, I need some fruit, what do? They beat the husbandman and send him back with what? With nothing. You know, the question is, what kind of stewards are we? You see, we are the husbandman. You are a husbandman. Selena, you get to be one today in a special way too. And what does God expect? He expects something in return. Let a man so account of us as of ministers of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. We have been given the stewards of the mysteries of God. But it says, moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found what? Faithful. And what does a faithful steward do? When the owner of the vineyard comes and says, I need something, what do? You give it to him. Obviously, you've been getting the benefits of that vineyard while he's been gone too. But he definitely deserves something. You see, we have a responsibility. Will the character they are cultivating recommend them to Jesus? That's the fruit that God is looking for in us. Will it fit them for the society of heaven? Do you belong in the society of heaven? Do you speak the language of heaven? Are you looking like you belong in heaven? Or do you belong right here? We do well to examine ourselves to see what manner of spirit we are cherishing. What is your spirit? What is the attitude that you have? Let us learn to speak gently, quietly, and even under circumstances most trying. It goes on. Let us control not only our words, but our thoughts and imaginations. If you control your thoughts and imaginations, the words will take care of themselves. Did you know that? People say, oh, I got angry. I didn't mean to get angry. You did mean to get angry. You were trying to keep it in, and it finally wouldn't stay inside. That's what happens. You need to repent. Why? Because you need to have a change of thought, change of heart. Let us be kind, be courteous in our words and deportment. Are we courteous to each other? When you go home from church, are you courteous in your family? I'll never forget the story of a deacon. He was there in a church, and he went out there in the front. He looked out there, and he sees a young boy at the front gate. And the little boy's going out there and looking and looking. He's looking for something there at the front gate. And finally, the deacon went over there and says, can I help you find something? He says, I don't know. It's here somewhere. He says, what are you looking at? It's right here. It's got to be right here. It's this spot right here. And I don't know what. I can't see it. It's right here. I said, what is it? He said, my parents, in the car, they're arguing. They're fighting with each other. And they cross this something. There's something here that changes them. And as soon as they cross this line, they're different people. Is that with us? Look around, make sure there's no reformers around. Okay, now I can go ahead. Is that us? Are we kind and courteous in our homes? Are we kind and courteous in the church? This is important. This is not just certain outward things. This is our nature, our character, our words, our deportment. There is a great neglect of this in this respect. We do not adorn the doctrines we profess. Did you know there's a dress reform for our doctrines? Did you know that? Here it says, we are not what? What does adorn mean? It's a dress. It's the way you dress, right? Do we adorn our doctrines we profess? How do you adorn doctrines? By being kind and courteous. That's how you do it. We are not what we might be, nor what God would have us be. Those who hope to be companions, excuse me. Those who hope to be the companions of holy angels should possess refined manners. If the principles of the Christian religion are carried out in the daily life, there will be a kind thoughtfulness for others. For this was what? The character of Christ. Other than the scribes and Pharisees, I mean, he was tough on those guys, okay? Those are the guys that he was really tough on. Everyone else, he was very kind to them, even when reproving sin. He was only tough on the scribes and Pharisees. That's it. And the Sadducees, okay, those guys. Those guys who knew better. Everyone else, it didn't mean he didn't condemn the sin. It's the way he did it. I mean, so much so, can you imagine? Who was attracted to Jesus? Who was attracted to him? Huh? The worst of sinners. Matter of fact, the Pharisees, they said, oh, who's this guy? He's attracting harlots and publicans. Do you think harlots and publicans would be attracted and excited to come to our church? Some maybe, but look, when you look at it, somebody comes, it just didn't look just right. A harlot came over here and, oh, you better stay out the door. You got to change before you come in here. Is that what has to happen? You see here, the character of Christ, it's how he did. That character needs to change. So how did the Pharisees miss the mark? Jesus says, for I say unto you, except your righteousness, it shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter in the kingdom of heaven. In other words, the scribes and Pharisees, they missed the mark. They didn't have a righteousness. Their righteousness was insufficient to go to heaven. Why? The rabbis counted their righteousness as what? A passport to heaven. They thought they had the right passport. And Jesus declared it to be insufficient and unworthy. Defective passport. External ceremonies and a theoretical knowledge of the truth constituted the Pharisaical righteousness. Is your righteousness in ceremonies and theoretical knowledge? Is that what your righteousness is about? The rabbis claimed to be holy through their own efforts in keeping the law, but their works had divorced righteousness from their religion. They were saying, oh, here, we're keeping the law. But in reality, what happened? They were separated from righteousness. While they were meticulous in ritual observances, their lives were immoral and debased. The way they lived their life, they were immoral. They were debased. Their so-called righteousness could never enter the kingdom of heaven because God's looking to change the person. Therefore, their passport was insufficient. And this is why the greatest deception of the human mind in the time of Christ was that a mere assent to the truth constitutes righteousness. Today, we have a baptism. We have a profession of faith. You're going to be professing your faith. But that profession is not righteousness. That profession is not righteousness. Making sure you understand all the theory is not righteousness. In all human experience, a theoretical knowledge of the truth has been proved to be insufficient for the saving of the soul. Matter of fact, I believe it's the next paragraph that says that that's the cause of all the religious conflicts that have been there since the beginning. Arguing over theoretical aspect of things that does not affect our daily life. So why does character matter? Will this seal be put upon the impure in mind, the fornicator, the adulterer, the man who covets his neighbor's wife? Talking about the seal of God. Let your souls answer the question, does my character correspond to the qualifications essential that I may receive a passport to the mansions Christ has prepared for those who are fitting for them? In other words, holiness must be inwrought in our character. Do you have a holy character? And that's why you find 144,000. What has happened? They have that character. And how important is the seal? It says here, only those who receive the seal of the living God will have what? Passport. Do you got your passport? You going to heaven, you got your passport? Or are you missing the passport? Or is your passport outdated? Wrong country. You know, my wife and I, we were leaving Australia one time. We were going over to Indonesia and Bali. And so we get to the airport. Her Australian passport is expired. Well, no problem. She has an American passport, so she gives them the American passport. The problem is, how do you get back in? So we get to Bali and everything else, and we get to the airport, and she doesn't have a visa for Australia. She doesn't need one. She has a passport, but the passport's expired. She goes to the airline there, and she gives them the Australian passport. They say, you can't come in. You can't go on the airplane. So the airport had to actually call the Australian embassy to get permission to let her get on the plane. She lands in Australia. She can't go through normal passport control. They take her right off there and says, you come in this little cubicle here. We need to talk. And after spending a bit of time, they finally let her out and said, you got to take care of this immediately. Now, you may be comfortable with your passport, but and depends on how tough they are. Sometimes they can be very tough. It's not a matter of, you got to have the passport. And the passport is the seal of the living God, which is our character. And instead, go back to the parable there. He's looking for what? He's looking for fruit. And they beat some of them. And later on in Mark chapter 12, what else did they do? He thought, okay, let me send my son. So he sends his son. And what do? They kill him. Are you killing him? When Christ is asking for fruit, when God is asking for fruit, are you killing Jesus? By Jesus Christ, it's through his death. He destroys him that had power over death. And then you and I are benefited by that. How? How are we benefited by the death of Christ? It says, know ye not that so many of us as are baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into this death. Today, Selena, you have this privilege, being baptized into his death. But you know what? We don't want to keep you under the water. We don't want to put you down in the water and leave Selena down there. What do we want to say? We want to see the resurrection. You see, therefore we are buried with him by baptism in the dead, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. In other words, the coming out of the baptismal water is a symbol of walking in newness of life. Why? Because we don't belong in this world. And you know, you can actually be born in a foreign country, live in a foreign country. My son was born in the United States. A couple of years ago, he decided to move to Australia. And you know what? He didn't have to apply. He just went there. Why? He had an Australian passport too. He had an Australian passport. Through his mother, through lineage, he has a passport of that country. Today, Selena, you get to have a passport. It says here, for many of you, as they've been baptized into Christ, have put on Christ. And Christ belongs there. Since Christ belongs in heaven, you get his passport through him. Just like my son got his passport for Australia through Susan. And if ye be Christ, if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. All the things belong to you. Some of you, if you don't have that passport yet, you need to get it. But you get it by how? By putting on Jesus Christ. And then you actually have blood lineage. And then you become what? We read it earlier. We become fellow citizens with the saints. And as citizens, we become sons and daughters of God. And there's a word here in Romans chapter 8. It's the word Abba, Father. Do you know what Abba means? You know, here's the Word English Bible, puts it there in parentheses there. It says Abba. Abba is Chaldee word for father or for daddy. Is there a difference between father and daddy? When you say, you know, kids, you know, sometimes, you know, oh, our dad, this, that, and the other, and all this kind of stuff. But they want something. What do they say? Daddy. Yeah. Daddy. Oh, that's a whole different world. Or do you have that relationship with God? Is God your daddy? Today you have that opportunity to have a passport. Today you have the opportunity in a special way to have daddy. Question is, are you preparing for a better land? You know, when Abraham was leaving to go to the better land, it says there in verse 3, God says to him, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and come into the land that I will show thee. In order to go to the better land, we have to leave our country, we have to leave our family, and to go to the better land. The question is, are you ready for the travel mandate? It says here, your people also shall be all righteous. Wow, that's the requirement. Are you deceived with your documents? And finally, question is, are your documents in order? And what's the document? In his days, Judah shall be saved and Israel shall dwell safely. And this is his name whereby he shall be called the Lord our righteousness. Is that your name? Are you the Lord our righteousness? Oh, you better be if you want to go to heaven. Seriously, you got to be the Lord our righteousness. That needs to be your name. Is your name the Lord our righteousness? Is that your name? Has to be your name. Has to be our experience. You know, so today we've had a chance to talk a little bit about travel mandates, haven't we? Well, I want to tell you something. I want to tell you that there's a land that is fairer than day. And by faith we can see it afar. For the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. Are you ready to go to the land that is fairer than day? Amen. It's